Hello and welcome back to Geek and Speak, the Geek and Speak podcast. Today we are doing something I don't think we've done on the podcast before. We are doing a ranking system. We are going over all of the guilds from Ravnica, the two color pairs. They are most commonly known by their two color guild correlations from the Ravnica world. Joining me today, I have my friend Jason. Jason, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good. Excited for the holidays, excited for late December football, early January football. I don't know how many episodes of the podcast it's going to take for you people to understand how big of a football fan I am. But yeah, things are going good here.
Awesome. And then, I guess we should clarify we're filming this before even Christmas. So, but we hope you guys had a great Christmas and New Year by the time you guys are seeing this. But Preston, how's it going?
Good. Excited for the holiday time. Should be got some stuff coming up with the family, so that should be fun. How about you?
Also doing good. Hi, I'm Morgan, and we are, normal stuff for Christmas for me and my family. So excited for that. As of today, when we are recording this episode, I just finished the Christmas episode of Upkeep. If you haven't seen that, go watch it because I poured my heart and soul and figured out hours of technology. It was a fight to the last second to even get that video out and finished at all, let alone before Christmas. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It was a fun game. And if you like the Geek and Speak podcast, consider supporting us on Patreon. If you're joining us on Patreon, you also get to hop in our Discord where you can hang out and talk Magic. And if you can't support us financially, that's cool. You can also help us out just by liking this video, sharing it with a friend who you think might like it, and simply going back and watching some of our other videos as well, and leaving comments when you have something noteworthy to say in any of our videos. So today, we are ranking the guilds of Ravnica, the two color pairs. And the reason we're doing this when we are doing it is because January 12th, so not too long after this is coming out, Ravnica Remastered is coming out. I just filmed a unboxing for a collector booster box for Ravnica Remastered. So if you like unboxings, make sure you subscribe. You can see that when it comes out. And then a couple days before this is coming out, there's a video I did that's a deck tech of my Ramos Dragon Engine deck that ties in a lot with Ravnica. So if you would like some more Ravnica related videos, go check those two videos out. But just to get into it, we are going to be talking in very broad terms. We know that, like, for example, two Gruul commanders are not necessarily doing the same thing. So we're going to be talking in very broad terms, just a quick overview of the individual colors so that we don't have to clarify later and be very specific when we talk about the specific color pairs. White, you're going to be going wide. You're going to gain some life. You're going to have pretty efficient board wipes and removal. Blue, lots of instant speed, sorceries, drawing lots of cards without significant downside. Black, you get pretty much everything, but you're probably going to have to pay some life or sacrifice something along the way. You can't blow up enchantments, though. Sucks to suck. And then red, fast, direct damage, aggressive. Green, extra lands, play big creatures, big stompies. And decent artifact and enchantment removal. So with that said, we're going to hop into our top 10. This is our from number 10 to number 1. Starting off with number 10, we took all of our 3 individual lists, our own personal rankings, averaged it out, and that's what this list is going to be. After we say what it is on our overall list, we'll go around in a circle and say where it was on our individual list. So all the way at the bottom at number 10, we have Azorius, the white-blue guild. Control, instant speed stuff, spirits, if you like tribal, you got vehicles, you got Shorokai, just looking at some of the popular commanders. But none of us are really high on this. I personally had it at number 7 on my list, and it's even lower for both of you guys, if I remember right. Where is it on your guys' lists?
On my list, I have it at the bottom. I put it at
Literal
number
number
10.
10.
I've never built an Azorius deck. It's not a color it's not a color combination that's ever been super interesting to me.
I have it at 8 personally.
So why do we think we're also down on it? I will say that I'm not anti-Azorius. I had Preston built a Maleficent deck, the Spirit Tribal Commander for the Christmas episode in 2022. And that was a fun deck. I played it for a while. I used to have a Grand Arbiter deck that was just, oh, it was troll central. It was so fun, but I took it apart because people hated it. Is that why we're so down on Azorius? Is because it's too controlly and kind of mean? Is it because why are we so down on it?
Well, so for me at least, Azorius is actually the pairing I hate the most of all 10, but there's two I put beneath it. We'll talk about those later. But the reason I don't like Azorius as much is mostly from my time on Arena, where Azorius and then Esper decks ran rampant the entire time I was playing on there. And I have always held a grudge against that general grouping of colors from that time period.
No, you're not a fan of going against the control decks. Is it more of you don't like playing against control decks, or is it you don't like playing control decks, or is it a little bit of both?
A little bit of both. Like I have an Azorius deck, but it's like my artifact Lulu deck.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more value engine-y, so it's not as control-y. There's some board wipes and stuff in there, but not more than your average commander deck. But yeah, Azorius in general, if you don't build it to be super control-y, I actually do think it can be a pretty fun combination. But both of those colors are definitely incentivized to be very control heavy.
Yeah, like I said, I put it at the bottom of my list. Every Azorius deck that I've encountered, for the most part, have all been super control-y and stacksy. And I just, I have my Machias deck, my mono white Machias deck, and there's a few stacks pieces in there, more tax than stacks, but just most of the time I see Azorius, I always assume that it's going to be that type of a build. And, sometimes it's not, sometimes it is, but it's always super control-y like that. And it's not my play style. It's not something I like playing against all the time.
Yeah, and I think that it is just kind of annoying. It's taxi, it's staxy. Grand Arbiter, like I said, I took that deck apart for a reason. And there are definitely cool Azorius commanders. I used to have a Shorkai Genesis engine, which according to EDH Rec is the number one Azorius deck. It's really cool. It's strong, and it's not control-y. It's kind of value engine-y. And Preston said that, there's artifact builds you can do in Azorius. So you don't have to build Azorius for control, but that's just where it tends to lean. And not everyone, it's not even that we don't necessarily like playing it, but playing against it can just feel kind of bad.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those decks you play against, and at the end of that game, you're like, that didn't feel fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, even with my Grand Arbiter deck, I won fairly often with it. And even then, it was long, grindy games where everyone was just miserable. So it didn't even, who cares if I won? So number 9 on our list is, I think, fairly similarly, Is It? So this is the Blue-Red Guild. And Blue-Red is kind of traditionally, pinging and spell slinger and little bursts of damage. Really, all of these color pairs, you could say there's artifact themes. Like even if you look at EDH Rag, one of the most popular commanders is Joyra for Is It. But it's a lot of spell slinger and small pinging damage and stuff like that. And spell slinger and control aren't necessarily the same thing, right? But I wonder if the reason it's so low on our list is kind of the same reason it's low on our Azorius was low on our list. So for me personally, I had Is It at number 9, so same place as it is on our overall list.
For me, I put it at number 3. I'm definitely different than you guys on this one.
So that's kind of my grievances with Is It, is that it's a lot of do this, and you're either, you're just kind of spinning your wheels and not winning the game, or you're just annoying everyone with all your instant speed interaction. Is that why you like it, or is there another reason you like it?
Well, I like it because, I've seen different variations of Is It where it can be really, I guess, intimidating and tough to play against, even for just like the feel good aspect of it that sometimes isn't there. But then I've also seen it where it's a really cool deck. It's a really fun thing to build around, and it's not super like here's the example I have. I mean, I obviously have my Joyride deck, which is a CEDH level deck, and it goes pretty crazy. But then I also have Gandalf the Grey, and that's a fun is it deck that, it is kind of comboing spells together. It's when you cast an instant, do this,
It's a
but
pretty
you don't
fair
have to
deck,
build
though.
it. Yeah, and then my brother-in-law has an Agar the Freezing Flame deck, and that's just giants, and it's just fun. It's a good fun deck. It's not like super competitive or super powerful or super controlly. He just wants to put out big giants and combo off with giants and play stuff that interacts well with giants. And so I've seen both sides of it. That's why is higher on my list.
I think in general, typal decks and artifact decks just kind of apply, like they're kind of the outliers, and I feel like they don't necessarily fall that far into the color identity for the color pair, except for there's one in particular where I don't agree with that, and we'll get to that later. But you know, most of them you can build artifact decks, most of them you can build typal decks. So those I don't really count. But Preston, what do you think about Is It? Where was it on your list and why?
Okay, so Is It is my number 10, and Rakdos is my number 9, and those two are at the bottom for the same reason for me. And that's the fact that of all the color pairings, I think both of those have the issue of really ignoring one of the colors. And in both of those instances, I think it's red. I think most Is It decks and most Rakdos decks focus on either their blue or black way more than 90% of the time. And I just don't like that as much when I'm building decks. Like most of my two color decks will lean one way or the other, but I feel like in general, I typically prefer it when the colors can work together a little more. Because with both of those pairings, I feel like it's do the thing whichever color wants to do, blue or black, for like 90% of the game, and then you finish it with a few red spells there at the end, which I just don't like as much personally.
I could see that.
I don't hate them as much as I hate Azorius decks usually, but I just like I can find Azorius decks I like. With Is It and Rakdos, I tend to not be as interested in those because of the way they tend to play out.
Yeah, and I've been trying to find a new Is It deck to build because I have so many decks that I would just like to be at a point where I could say that I found a deck for every color combination that I enjoy. But every single time I try building an Is It deck, I end up splashing white and it just becomes Jeskai. So, I don't know, man. So next on our list at number 8, we have Gruul. So this is the red-green color pair. According to EDH Rec, number 1 commander on that list is Tovolar, but since Tovolar is a typal commander, we'll kind of ignore that. But, you got Landfall, you got Big Stompy, you got stuff that cares about mana dorks, you got, it's a lot of what you would expect, ramp into your big, dumb, beefy creatures. So for me personally, I had Gruul as my number 10. I really don't like Gruul. I've played Gruul twice on our show. I played it in episode 11 where we spun a wheel, got a random 2-color pair, and we built a deck. I got Gruul, least favorite color pair. It ended up being a pretty decent deck, but it was just kind of boring to play for me personally. And then I played it for a $100 budget episode where I played Myria, and it was like Gruul, like cantrippy artifacts. And that was kind of a cool deck, but every single time I build a Gruul deck, I just get so tired of it so fast. And I think part of that is just because green has become my least favorite color in Commander. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but it's just, I like that green just kind of does everything. The only thing that green doesn't do very well is board wipes. And to me, that's just kind of boring. So I think that those two things, it's like debatably the worst color in Commander mixed with my personal least favorite color in Commander. Just every time I've had 4 Gruul Commander decks at different points, It's just not for me. That doesn't translate to 60 card because one of my favorite standard decks in recent years was when Zendikar Rising was in standard recently. And I was playing a Gruul landfall deck. That deck was sweet. It was so fun. But for Commander, that's where it goes for me.
Yeah,
So for me,
I
oh,
put
go ahead.
Gruul a little bit higher. I put Gruul a little bit higher than that because I have a Tovolar deck. I put Gruul at number
Yeah.
5. Uh, Tovolar's fun. I have a fun time with it, and I don't think Gruul is as bad of a color combination as you do. Because I think that red complements green in a lot of different ways.
I agree.
When you think about how green, like you said, is a lot of just big dumb creatures that get out there and just hit people. There's a lot of really good creatures in green that have cool abilities, like when they attack, when they enter the battlefield, other things like that. But also, it pairs well with red because these are big dumb creatures, sure, but red has damage doublers, triplers,
Yeah.
extra combat steps.
Well, I think the color pair makes
Green is
sense to me.
good. Green is good for ramping, and red is good for like quick bursts of a lot of mana at one time. And I think that aspect of red or that aspect of green can help lead to that part of red, which then feeds back into you having a huge turn with your big green creatures. So I think that they work really well together, even
They
if it's not in a typal deck like that.
So they do go good together because I mean, even if you just play it as simply and fairly as possible, you could say like your early game is you play the small aggressive red creatures and you're ramping with your green cards, and then in the late game you're using your red cards to either stabilize and your green cards to stomp over your opponents and finish the game. But then it's better than that because red has enchantments and effects and stuff that say like when a creature enters the battlefield, deal damage to something equal to that creature's power. So you play those red cards and then you play your giant green cards and then you're just dealing tons of damage. And then if you play a giant green creature, who cares? You don't get to attack with it right away, except now you're in red, so you can give it haste in a lot of ways. So it is better than I give it credit for, but my personal grievances and biases will come into this. But Preston, what about you?
Yeah, so I have Girl at number 6, right around the same area Jason has it. And for me, I do have a Girl deck online. My Atali Primal Conqueror, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, Primal Conqueror. I love that deck online. Because that one is a lot more interesting to me than the average Girl deck, which is why it's typically in the middle for me as a color combination. I do think that color pairing can be fun, but yeah, definitely gets old quickly. But I like that deck because it's a little more interesting. I like clone Atali to get his effect more often. I don't even really transform him super often with that deck, which is what most people try to do, I feel like. Yeah, for me, it can be fun, but also repetitive. I feel like with most of them. There's a couple interesting ones, like the artifact one. Like Gruul Artifacts was not a thing before Maria. I think that's why that one's so popular.
And that was
That's
a fun
about
deck to play. I
12
enjoyed
plays.
playing it. It's just I got tired of it quick
Yeah.
because it just
So
kind
there's
of
a
does
couple
the
interesting.
thing.
Yeah, there's a few interesting ones, but most of them are just smack down big creatures, beat your opponents in the head with.
Hmm.
Which I do appreciate because I feel like Gruul is the last color pairing that still does that a lot. Most of the other color pairings just don't really do that as much anymore in Commander. So it is interesting in that aspect, at least.
All right, going into number 7 for our list, we have Rakdos. And Preston's already given us a little bit of context for Rakdos. But this is the Black Red Guild. I kind of view this as the rain in hell. What's the famous saying with that? Anyways, it's kind of chaotic. Your impulse drawing, you're dealing damage, you're sacrificing stuff. And I kind of agree with Preston that a lot of Rakdos is leaning very heavily on black. However, where the red comes in is the damage that's going to add up, I feel like is very red. And then it cares a lot about the discarding and randomness and impulse draw and stuff like that, which is very red. So I think it's a little bit of a better blend than Preston gives it credit for, though I don't disagree with his sentiment that it is probably very black leaning, at least for a lot of the more popular commanders. But this is probably, I think if it wasn't for me, I think this probably could have ended up much lower on our overall list because I had Rakdos at number one. And that's kind of weird because my only Rakdos deck right now is Prosper, which is the number one Rakdos deck according to EDH Rec. So very boring answer. I apologize. However, I have Obnixilis in my collection. I've thought about building that. I'm currently building a Rowan Scion of War deck. I play a lot of these cards in my other decks, and some of my decks, they're important parts of some of my other decks. So I like the kind of chaotic nature of Rakdos, which again, this is a great example if it doesn't translate to 60 card very well, because I think in Rakdos, in most 60 card formats, is a lot more, you have a lot more control over that chaotic element of it. But in Commander, where I really don't care if I win or lose, I'm just trying to do something cool and chaotic. I really like it. And like in my Chaos deck, I have a ton of Rakdos cards in there. But where did you guys have it on your list, and why do you feel that way about it?
So Preston already talked about his feelings about Rakdos a bit. I put it at number 8 on my list. I agree with what Preston was saying. The So I built one Rakdos deck, saw it on the channel. It was my Kark the Thumbless, and I don't even remember what the partner I chose for it was. Didn't really do a whole lot. I think I got land screwed in that game. Didn't play a whole lot of lands, so I didn't get to do a whole lot of stuff. But just Rakdos decks have never amazed me. The color combination I always thought for a while was really cool, and I wanted to build a Rakdos deck, and then I built one, and I mean, I had a bad time with it, sure, but I didn't think it was a bad deck. But every time I see somebody play a Rakdos deck, it does the same thing. Just, it's not super exciting. The cards that come out of that color combination is the only reason I didn't put it at number 10. Because I like the black-red cards individually that go in other decks than I do from, I have Boros and Azorius below Rakdos. Yeah, and here's an example. I saw a Rakdos deck for a long time. It was Rakdos, whatever the Rakdos commander is, whichever version of Rakdos, where your spells cost 1 less for each life your opponents have lost.
Lord of Riots.
Yeah. And I saw that for a long time, and it was an Eldrazi deck. So
Yes.
it was like, good deck, good deck.
Magic.
No complaints there about it being a bad deck. But if you're building a Rakdos deck to play colorless cards, do I need to make any further point? I guess. I don't think so.
On a recent episode of Commander Clash, Krim played a Rakdos vehicles deck, and it was pretty funny because you have all those payoffs and stuff. He also had Eldrazi in there. But then, he's
Right.
like, well, I have this Eldrazi, but I'm just going to shove it in a 2/2 car and smack face. And that was pretty funny. But, Preston, did you have anything to add that you didn't get to mention earlier?
So I have it at number 9, and I think part of the reason I put Rakdos over Izzet specifically was I used to have a Zancha Sleeper Agent deck where the deck itself was mostly focused around playing curses, and I really loved that deck back when I had it. I did lose that a couple years ago, and I've never rebuilt it. But I did have a lot of fun when I had it, and when I'm scrolling through these, there are some interesting ones. Like I think Rakdos is the only color pairing I've seen so far where one of the Unfinity commanders is one of the top ones.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely some interesting options here. But yeah, I feel like Rakdos is again very black leaning most of the time with a few red things to end the game, which still isn't my favorite, but there are definitely some Rakdos decks I think could be interesting if I ever got around to building them.
Yeah. Well, and there's like what Jason was saying, there's just a lot of cards in this color combination that you're going to play anyways, like Terminate, Bedevil, Rakdos Charm. There's a new card called
Bullet
Decadent Dragon
Citadel.
that's really sweet. Yeah, there's a lot of cards in this color combination that even if you're not straight up Rakdos, if you're Jund or something like that, you're going to play some of these cards anyway. So Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our number 6 on our overall list. This is Boros. This is the white red guild. And for a lot of people, this is kind of a stinker. To me, this is like the definition of like, seen it, done that, let's move on. Because it's a lot of equipments matter, and how many times can you redo that? Let's go white aggressive. How many times can you do that? However, there are some all-stars in Boros. Osgir the Reconstructor is one of my favorite commander decks. Firesong and Sunspeaker, really cool commander deck. And then there's also just some other slight variations. Like if you can do it, if Boros does something to stand out from the traditional artifact creatures or equipment matters or go wide, if you do anything that's like a little bit different, like Feather's the number one Boros commander according to EDH Rec. It's a very unique commander for the color combination.
Preston knows all about that.
Yeah. But I had Boros as number 5. So pretty in the middle. And a lot of that is because I like that archetype for commander. I think playing with a bunch of equipments is fun. I like artifact decks. The problem is it just gets old. Like they're like, oh, here's the 10th new legendary creature that's Boros this year that cares about equipment. It's like, okay, yeah, okay, but it just gets old. But
some of them care about auras too.
Yes, okay, you're right. It just gets old, but I like it. So that's why it's pretty in the middle for me. But what do you guys think about Boros?
I put it at number 9 below Rakdos because as much as what Preston was saying is Rakdos leans heavy on black cards and then red cards that finish the game. And how I said that you build a Rakdos deck just to play colorless spells. Boros is even more of that. And that's my problem.
That's true. Because it's all artifact decks.
Every time that you see, or every time that I see a Boros deck come to the table, I go back and I look at my deck and I'd be like, all right, do I have mass artifact removal? All right, good. They're not going to win this game. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I see the same thing every time. And also, I put it at number 9 because Preston has somewhat traumatized me with Feather, but that's okay. We're working on that.
Therapy sessions are starting to work. All right. Preston,
yeah, exactly.
How do you feel about Boros?
Yeah, so I have Boros at 3, and if it wasn't for the fact that Feather and Firesong and Sunspeaker exist, it probably very well could be my number 10. Really? This is the hardest carry of the guilds for me, I think, when it comes to a few specific commanders pulling all the weight. Mm-hmm. Because yeah, you're right. All those like equipment and aura decks are like, the first time you see one like go off, I think that can be fun, but then there's 50 million variations of it and it does get super boring. But obviously with Firesong and Sunspeaker, I'm a fan of life gain. We'll talk about that more when we get to Selesnya. But yeah, so I always love a good life gain deck, and I like Firesong and Sunspeaker dealing damage while they do it. I built a deck of that for the last Christmas episode, if people haven't seen that one yet, if people want to go watch that. Jason ended up getting that deck, and he didn't keep it together, so I might build that deck at some point, because I do really love that pairing. But the main thing I love is definitely Feather the Redeemed, mostly because she takes all of these little spells that are not good in any other commander deck and makes them good, which is really interesting. And she's a Boros commander that's actually good at drawing cards. There's a few of those, but there's not a lot.
Yeah, Firesong and Sunspeaker and Feather specifically are kind of interesting because you don't associate Boros with Spellslinger, but those are kind of Spellslinger decks, kind of. So that's like a fun way to spice it up. But that was, yeah, like I was saying, like Boros is so heavily carried by the odd ones out. Like even if you're just looking at the list of the most popular commanders on EDH Rec, that's true. Like people like the more unique Boros commanders because like, and part of it's like equipment decks are just awkward because. And I was finding this out when I was building Steven's deck for the Christmas episode that just came out for this year, the Secret Santa episode. I built him a Sir Gwyn Hero of Ashvale, I think is what it's called, which is black it's black, red, white. So there's some black in there. But I found that it's actually very complicated to build decks like that because you have to make sure that if you're not going Voltron, if you're going Voltron, it's a different story. But if you're not doing that, it's an awkward balance of you have to have enough equipments to make sure you have the equipment payoff met, but then you also have to make sure you still have enough creatures to carry those equipments. So it's a really awkward balance. But that's why I liked Jason's Othari deck that Tommy built him, is because there's like the 4 Mirrodin mechanic or whatever, the equipments that come down and they come with the James Dean token. Like that was kind of nice. It's a nice mechanic. I'd like to see more of that stuff. But
one thing I will say, I haven't played that deck again since that, but I'm excited to play it and I want to keep playing it. I want to learn it more and I want to get better with playing it.
All right,
so it's a fun deck.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go ahead and move on to number 5. This is Selesnya. So this is the green-white color pair. And this is Sithis is number 1. So this is where you get into like enchantments and stuff like this. Like if you're doing 2-color enchantments, you probably want to do this color combination. I think a lot of the 3-color combinations are more interesting for enchantments, but I digress. But it's a lot of go wide kind of stuff. Like the white is here to help you go wide with lots of tokens or small creatures or whatever. And then the green is there to buff it up and then make sure you have something more interesting to do in the late game. And then both of these colors are also pretty good at recursion, specifically creature recursion. So that's interesting as well. Not that I've necessarily ever seen a Selesnya reanimator deck or anything like that, but that's something that someone could theoretically do. And I think that makes these decks more resilient.
One thing you want to also remember is white is by far the best color at protection.
Yes.
And green, I would say, green is okay at preventing damage. Green is really good at preventing damage, but overall protection, green, I think, lacks. And I think that white just is able to help carry the load, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I personally had Selesnya as number 8. I will say, though, that's something I'm trying to change. The reason it's number 8 for me is because it just feels noodly. Like white is one of, if not my favorite colors, because it's versatile. It's a great support piece. If you need to make your deck a little bit better, splash white, and you'll probably make the deck better. But then green, like I said, is my least favorite color in Commander because and it's not no knock against green. Green is arguably the best color in Commander. I'm just personally bored of it. But I am trying to change that because I think it's weird that I have so many decks for so many different archetypes and so many color combinations. And every time I build a Selesnya deck, they don't stick. Like I don't have them for very long. But I've been thinking about building a new token deck because I have the Marnius Calgar whatever precon from Warhammer, and I have a slightly upgraded precon of that, but it's drifted so much that's barely what it needs to be functional. So I kind of want to build a new token deck, and I think that I probably need to go Selesnya to make that work. But what do you guys think? I know what Preston thinks, but let's get it straight from the guy's mouth.
All right. I'll let Preston.
You want to go first?
Go, yeah, because you're gonna talk it up way more than I am. So I'll go ahead and
Okay.
We could
go ahead.
We could save the good stuff for last. To me, Selesnya is. I don't know if this is gonna make sense to anybody, but whenever Selesnya wants to be Simic so bad. It just wants to play solitaire and do all these fun, really cool things, but it just doesn't do it as well as Simic does. And it kind of falls into the same thing where I see a lot of the same Selesnya stuff, go wide with creatures, play a lot of enchantments. It's a variation of one of those two things. Sometimes it's a combination of those two things. But it's fun. My opinion on Selesnya has softened since we played our Pauper episode, which I don't. Is that going to come out before this or after this?
That will come out, I think, 2 days after this video. So stay tuned. Jason
Yeah,
plays a cool
so
Selesnya deck.
yeah, so I had a good time playing in that game with this Lesnia deck, and Paige had a Sithis deck, and I was always intimidated by it. I was
I
always
hate that
very
deck.
intimidated by that deck. That deck is so good. Um, but it's, I just don't have as much fun with it. That's, I guess, that's why it's at number 7 for me.
I
Preston, on the other hand,
Yeah, Preston, why don't you tell the people how you really feel?
All right, Selesnya is my number one color combination of the two color combinations, at least. It has my favorite commander of all time, Tristani Selesnya's voice. Uh, and
Which
I
was the
think
first
the
commander
thing that,
deck you ever built, right?
yeah, my first commander deck, it's entirely Morgan's fault. Everyone blame him.
Sorry, guys.
Uh, but I think the thing that really makes me appreciate Selesnya is of all the two color combinations, I feel green and white are the best at helping each other do what they both want to do without ever overshadowing each other. I feel like most of the other ones, one of the colors tends to really sort of take hold, which is why like I put Rakdos and is it down at the bottom because those are so one-sided with their colors. But with Selesnya, I genuinely think it is the most 50-50 balance of any two color combinations that you're going to get, in my opinion. You can do creatures. I think Selesnya is your best, by far, two color planeswalker option by a pretty wide margin. There's a couple Staxy ones you can do. There's some ETB creature decks are really good in Selesnya. So I
Mhm.
really do think Selesnya has more options than just the typical enchantment or wide creature board states that people tend to attribute it to, but I do realize that most people tend to build their decks like that.
Yeah. And it obviously has the power. Just something to note. Number 5 on EDH rec for commanders in Selesnya is Karametra, God of Harvests. That card is bonkers. I have a companion deck with Umari, I think is what it's called. So the entire 99, all of the non-lands are creatures. And I'll be playing that in a semi close episode of Upkeep, like 3 episodes from now or something. And Karametra is maybe the best card in the deck. It's so good because all of these, your whole deck is just creatures, and then you're just using Karametra whenever you cast those creature spells, you're now ramping. You're getting to grab a forest or plains, and it's not basic. You can grab your triomes, you can grab your duels, and it's a. I'm pleasantly surprised by that card. It's really good. But I think that's a good point that I hadn't thought about, Preston, is that it does do a really good job balancing the importance of both colors. All right. Moving on to number 4 on our list, we have Golgari. So this is the Black Green Guild. So this is all about, let's ignore the couple Typal commanders that are close to the top. Typal decks are just popular. People like them. People want to play their elves. Like Sith Lathril is the number 1 Golgari commander. People like elves. Shatterfang's number 2 because squirrels are freaking lit. But really, Golgari is, I think, the sacrifice. Like maybe not the best, but it's like one of those sacrificey color pairs. And I think that's really,
it's like the aristocrats,
yeah, maybe tied with Orzhov for aristocrats,
probably.
because they're both so good. Like we all associate black with sacrificing, but green also has a ton of sacrifice. Like one of my favorite green cards is Greater Good. It's an enchantment that you sacrifice a creature, you draw cards equal to its power. So a lot of the Golgari decks and stuff are caring about, you're sacrificing your lands, get extra lands, like get Rock Monster. You're sacrificing your creatures to get some kind of value. And, black is obviously really good at reanimating creatures. Green is also pretty good at getting stuff back from your graveyard, either directly to the battlefield or back to your hand or whatever. It's pretty good. And I used to say that Golgari was like my favorite color pair. Like the first deck I ever had in Magic was a Golgari deck. I had a couple at different times, and it kind of had fallen out of favor for me just because I was so tired of green. But I will say that this year, or this year that just passed in 2023, I built two new Golgari decks, and I love both of them. I have a Shelob Child of Ungoliant deck that I just built, and that's of the two I built, I think that one's the one I like less. Because I have a couple decks that do similar things, but it's pretty fun. And then I have a Yargle and Voltani deck. It's just so stupid and it's so fun. And I haven't got to play it much yet, but it's one of my new favorite decks. So I actually, between historically, I used to really like Golgari, and I have a couple decks that I'm playing right now that I really like. I actually have Golgari at number 2 on my personal list.
For me, I put Golgari at number 6. And looking at it now, I might switch it with Gruul because I put Gruul at number 5. Golgari is a better color combination than Gruul, so I would probably switch those. But I have a Karth the Lion deck, and it's black and green planeswalkers, and that deck goes hard. I love it. Golgari is such a fun color combination. I truly think that with the versatility of those cards and how well you can get them to synergize with each other, there's a bunch of different ways to build a Golgari deck. It's always just fun taking advantage of things that seem like they're bad.
Mhm.
You know, like game actions that seem bad, but because you're playing in these colors, you have an upside that other color combinations wouldn't get.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very unique color combination.
Well, and for a lot of people, black is like a hard color to master when they're new to the game, because it's like, why would I want to get rid of my own stuff? I just paid mana for this stuff. I don't want to get rid of my own stuff. No, there's reasons you'd want to do that. All right. So, and I think Golgari just is that times 10. So it's fun when you get it.
A lot of fun stuff that you can do with Golgari and sacrificing your own stuff.
And if you'd like to see Jason's Golgari Planeswalker deck, you can check that out on episode 13 of our Commander show, where we played Plane Chase. It was awesome.
It's so good.
It was such a fun game. Preston, what are your thoughts on Golgari?
So yes. So for Golgari, I had it at number 7, which
it's lower than
so
I would have expected.
I'm the lowest person here when it comes to Golgari. And so I think it is pretty important to point out how similar it is to Orzhov. I have Orzhov rated higher for me. I like how it works more. But Golgari is just Orzhov, but stronger for two main reasons. One, it has the mana, obviously, because a lot of black stuff is like, it's good at sacrificing it, but it really needs help getting mana in Commander. Like in 60 card formats, it can generate mana just fine with those like one turn generates the mana spells and stuff. But in Commander, where you're playing a lot of turns, it has a harder time keeping up with that mana, where green supports it. And green is actually the best recursion color for everything. Like black is good at creature recursion, and all the other colors have other things they can recur, but green can hit anything, and none of the other colors do it as well as green. So you can sacrifice anything with a green deck and have ways to bring it back, which is really important, I feel like. But as for why I have it rated lower, it's just not my favorite way to utilize green overall, I don't think. I enjoy what Golgari does. It's just I haven't really had a Golgari deck in a while that's really interested me besides Yargle and Motani, but you already built it, so I was like, I'll let Morgan have that one.
So
yeah,
I don't want to spoil too much, but obviously we haven't talked about Orzhov, so it's obviously higher up on the list. And I agree with something that we've all said, that it's like Golgari is just better Orzhov. So why is it that we like, on average, why do we like Orzhov so much better than Golgari? Can we say much without spoiling it, or should we just save it to when we talk about Orzhov?
I mean, mine is just because I like to gain life.
That's fair.
I could say this. I think that it really feeds into what you're talking about with why you don't like green. Green is a boring color. Green does just about everything except board wipe. So yeah, obviously you want to make a deck stronger, add green to it. It's going to be stronger than if you add white to it. But I think that that's not as fun.
Yeah, that's probably true. So moving on to number 3, we have Dimir. So this is the black blue color combination. And this is the one that I think we need to talk about the typal commanders because this makes sense to me. So black blue, you're trying to be sneaky, you're recurring some stuff. It's kind of control-y, it's a little grindy, it's a little dark and gritty. The typal commanders are zombies and ninjas. That is so fitting. That like most of the typal commanders, they could have been any color combination, and there's a maybe an argument you can make that they could be something else. The Dimir ones feel Dimir. So I just thought that was fun and worth mentioning. You have
Also
Yuriko,
horrors
yeah, and horrors. So
and rogues.
I thought that was worth
All
mentioning
yeah.
all the sneaky stuff. But I had Dimir at number 3, so same place as it is on our overall list. My first deck was a zombie deck, and it was mono black when I originally built it. But when I was like, okay, this is how you play Commander, I need to do some upgrades and change my deck. I turned it into a Scarab God deck, and I don't play it that often anymore, but I still have a soft spot for it. I almost built Lord of the Nazgul because it was cool. I just like playing the black blue shell. I like playing. I think I maybe have one other Dimir deck, but I also black blue red. I like black blue white.
I have it at number 4. One of the first decks I ever built, it might have been the first deck I ever built, was Phoenix, God of Deception. And I built that as a persistent petitioners deck.
Heck yeah.
I just had so much fun playing it. Other people did not. Other people did not enjoy when I would mill 12 cards at a time. They did not have a good time with it.
Commander players are so like needlessly anti-mill. Like mill is really
Yeah,
not that bad in Commander.
it's
People
not. It's
hate
really
it.
not. You because think about how many cards there are that say like, shuffle your graveyard back into your library that you could play
Yeah.
in Commander. I
Yeah.
mean,
And
but I just
there's so many ways to just get stuff back too. So like it's not that much of a downside, but it's like, oh, it'd be cool if I drew my soul ring, or oh, it'd be cool if I draw my land, and then you mill and there's a land. You're like, people just hate it for no
um
reason.
so I really like the color combination. I like blue a lot, I like black a lot, and I do think here's another thing about me that I really feel like you guys know at this point. I love flavor in Magic cards. Like if it's got good flavor, then I probably like the card a lot. And Dimir is very flavorful. Like you said, all of the Dimir cards, they feel Dimir. The main two creature types are ninjas and zombies. That zombies, they're dead. So there's the black, and then it takes science or magic, the blue, to bring them back. And then with ninjas, I love it. The flavor in Dimir is just on point. It's fantastic. And I put it at number 4 because there are a few colors that I like more than it, color combinations I like more than it. But I
It's high up
soft
there.
spot in my heart for Dimir as well.
Preston, how do you feel about Dimir?
So I also have Dimir at 4, mostly because of my Gyruda deck. That's probably my favorite deck to play right now at this point. Like it's really fun to me to be able to play all 4 people's decks basically, which is something Dimir really likes to do just in general. That's probably the second most common thing Dimir does after the tribal decks. I will say those 2 things are kind of most of what Dimir does, which is why I didn't put it any higher. Like you have to scroll down a while before you hit a Dimir deck that's not some version of mill, play other people's stuff, or a typal deck.
Yeah. I will say your Gyruda deck is pretty sweet. Preston played it in our test episode for Upkeep, so we call it Upkeep Episode 0. You can find it on the channel. And then I believe Jason plays it in an upcoming episode. We
Yep.
have an upcoming episode that's coming. We just filmed it like last week or something. But it's coming out in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. And Jason played it, and it did pretty well from what I remember. So it's a cool deck. I'm glad I hate it when we have cool decks that don't get to show up on the show. And I'm just glad that's one that's going to be making another comeback. So yeah, I do agree with Preston that it's kind of weird that it's mostly typal, steal stuff, and mill. or some combination of that. But at least it has an identity. I feel like when you start doing like I feel like individual colors, their identity is fairly solid. But when you get into color pairs, especially like 3, 4, 5 color decks, it's like what's why? But the fact that Dimir feels Dimir and it makes sense, I like that. I like the uniformity. Does it get old? Like with Boros. Does it get old? Yeah, sure, but it makes sense to me.
So I think what separates Demir from Boros is the fact that black and blue are better colors than red and white.
Yeah. No, I agree. So we are actually wrapping this up faster than you would think because when we go into number two, I have to mention that number one and number two are actually tied. We thought about finding a way to break it up, but when we were doing our averaging, we couldn't decide, and we're just going to say they're tied. So we have Orzhov and Simic tied for number one. And I think that that's interesting because they're they're pretty different. So Orzhov is the white black guild. And like what we were talking about with Golgari, it's like where's Golgari, you know? Sacrificing stuff for value, gain it back, recurring it. There's a couple curse commanders, you know, stuff that cares about enchantments and whatnot. It has like draining effects, so you know, people lose life, so I'm gonna gain life. The life swap deck that I played in episode 17, 19, I don't remember. It was a mono black life swap deck. I changed it so that it's now Selenia, which is a black white angel deck, and adding white to the deck just made it so much more spicy. It's pretty cool. And I had it as Orzhov, I had as my number 4 overall. Let's talk a little bit more about Orzhov, and then we'll come back around to Simic. Where did you guys have Orzhov and why?
I had Orzhov at number 5. So I do like Orzhov a lot. I don't currently have an Orzhov deck. I mean, I did get one from Jason during the Christmas episode, but I am going to be adding blue to that deck, so it's not together right now. But the thing with Orzhov is, you know, it is weaker than Golgari, but it has life gain, which I'm a big fan of. Like, almost all of the top ones have something to do with life gaining, which is pretty big when it comes to Preston. That's a pretty big deal. But also, something I think Orzhov does that I like a lot is that in most decks, when you board wipe, it just feels bad for all the other players because you're just clearing the board. But with Orzhov, because most of your creatures are going to have death triggers, at least it feels like you're still doing something to progress a board when you board wipe an Orzhov usually. And you have all the recursion, so it feels like this person is actually making the game go faster and not stalling out, which I think is part of the reason people might like it more than Golgari.
For me, I put Orzhov at number 2. Number 1. Orzhov is my favorite color combination in the game. And I think it's still our most popular episode, or our most viewed episode, I should say, is our favorite commander decks. And I played Thalys, which was an Orzhov deck. I love that deck. It's still to this day probably my favorite deck. I have so much fun when I play it. I accidentally put a janky little 4-card combo that goes infinite in there, and I didn't even realize it until I was playing against my brother-in-law one day, and I had all the cards on the battlefield. This was a couple of years ago. He wasn't my brother-in-law quite yet. But I was looking at the cards I had. I was like, wait, if I do this, then that does this, and that makes this do. Oh. It's fun. And I just love the different things that you can do with Orzhov. You know, Preston talks about life gain. The deck that I built for him involved, having to use your life as a resource, Orzhov is probably the best color at doing that. I can't think of a color that will give you more payoffs for using life and then also give you multiple opportunities to gain that life back so that you can then again use that life for more resource. But then there's also, you can go wide with a token build. It's just a fun color. It's a fun color combination to play, especially since white has gotten all the improvements that it has over the past couple of years. And this goes back to earlier when we were talking about why Orzhov is more fun than Golgari, even though we kind of agree Golgari is better. And, I really think that it's because we've gotten so saturated with really, really good green cards that everybody's just tired of playing green because they're tired of seeing green at a table because everybody knows how good of a color it is. So if you want to make a deck better, you add green to it. But it seems like now if you want to make a deck a little bit better and a lot more fun to play, you add white to it.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that this is like removal central. Black has
Oh
pretty
yeah.
decent removal. White is probably the best, maybe not the best removal, but it's the most flexible and most efficient removal. Both colors are great at recurring stuff, especially creatures. And if you're just looking at the top commanders according to EDH Rec, it's awesome. There's there's aristocrats or sacrifice kind of decks. There's life gain, life swap, lose life, pay life. There's a couple +1/+1 counter decks. There's typal decks. There's token decks. There's a vehicle deck. There's so many, and a lot of the times it's variations and combinations of a little bit of A and a little bit of B, a little bit of a mix of all that. There are just so many sick commanders, but they all feel black white, and that's cool.
The third most popular commander in Orzhov is a deck that wants you to put auras on your opponent's creatures. That's pretty awesome. Like,
Yeah.
you're not gonna
Yeah,
get that
enchantments.
in
Yeah.
basically any other combination, probably.
It's the versatility of that color combination that makes it so attractive and so much fun to play. And again, I don't think it would be if white hadn't gotten the huge additions to it that it has. The Wizards of the Coast has definitely heard the community and our complaints, at least the commander community, and heard our complaints about how we wanted white to be better because white was really, really bad for a really long time. And I think that it's in a really good place now.
Yeah, I think white's the best support color. I've said this many times. It has efficient removal. It has good board wipes that are flexible and or one-sided and or not a lot of money. And
It has exile, which is really big.
yes. So
So I guess, do we really think that Golgari is better than Orzhov? Because it sounds like we've just talked ourselves out of that opinion.
well, okay, so I think if we're specifically talking aristocrats, Golgari is technically better. Because Golgari is going to let you play bigger creatures and play them faster because of all the ramp and stuff that green gives you. And green has so many like payoffs for the big creatures, like I said, like a lot of the cards that are in my Yargle and Multani deck that are sacrifice creature, you're getting value off of the fact that it's a big creature. And then because you're ramping in green, you're able to play them faster. Whereas a lot of the recursion is about the same because it's black, but white recursion specifically for creatures is a lot of
little weenies.
Yeah, it's smaller creatures specifically, whereas green will let you get back anything. So I think if it's aristocrats, Golgari is better. But if you're talking maybe open-endedness, but also just having a lot of other cool options, I still put Orzhov above Golgari.
Oh yeah, for sure. If you're talking options, there isn't a better color combination for options.
Speaking about weird options, so tied with number 1/number 2, we have Simic. So Simic is everyone knows it's the blue-green guild. We're gonna draw cards. We're gonna play lands. We're gonna draw cards when we play those lands. We're gonna finish it off by decking ourselves. I mean, playing big creatures. And
and by the way, if you wanted to try and do anything to stop me, no, you won't.
Yeah, because you got the counter spells and the mana to hold up those counter spells even after dropping a 9-drop. So there's not much to say about Simic. I think the reason Simic is this high on the list is because we have a dirtily side. We like to play it. Preston has an Iesi deck. Jason has a Tetiova deck. Steven has an Ajax and Nev deck, which is actually pretty sweet. Tommy has an Emoti deck. This is a less popular one, but the Simic deck, I don't have a Simic deck anymore. I'm building one, though. It's Jalriel Voice of Zhalfir, which is turning your lands into creatures.
Wait, you took the Goose Mother apart?
Yeah, I didn't keep Goose Mother together. because I had to borrow so many cards from other decks to build it, and I didn't want to like buy duplicates of those cards, and it just felt too it felt too Simic. So for
It's a
me personally,
Simic deck. It's a
I
Simic
know.
deck. How? Okay. Okay.
So I pulled it down. If it was up to me to get Simic to not be number one or tied for number one, but I failed. I had Simic at number 6 on my personal list, and it really comes down to like what I said. I'm just bored of green. It's nothing against the color combination. I think if we're talking objectively, if we were doing this not based on our personal preference, if we were doing this based on power level, there's an argument that Simic should just be number one without contest because green is the best color in Commander, and then blue is probably tied for second best. So yeah, we were destined to get here. You're going to have all the man in the world to do whatever the heck it is you need to do, and I think part of it too is that Simic does have a lot of just the same old play lands, draw cards, and stuff like that. But there are other ways to build Simic. There's a Emoti we mentioned, which is a cascading commander, which is pretty cool. There's some token commanders, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of like CDH kind of combo-y commanders. Sea creature typal is pretty neat. There are a lot of cool Simic decks. But I think in practice they all kind of start to play the same. But what do you guys think about Simic?
If we had ranked based on power, Simic would not be first place. It would be first, second, and third.
Just
That's
put
how
some of the other ones
Simic
completely
is.
off the list.
That's accurate.
Yeah, so for me, I had Simic in second place because it is kind of boring at this point, but man, it's just so fun to play 15 lands a turn and tap them for 37 mana. Like it's always going to feel good to play. Boring to play against maybe and not as fun, but playing it, oh, nothing beats that.
And as an editor, I hate editing Simic decks, man, because we did not straight Simic, but Arcades is what Tommy played on the Christmas episode this year. It's basically a Simic deck. It just had white for removal. And then there was the Emoti deck, which has come out a couple times. It's going to come out at least one other time this season. Aisi's on an upcoming episode. Jason played Tatiova recently. I played Goose Mother on the Eldraine episode. They all play the same, and they're all kind of a nightmare to edit, just because they're like taking so many game actions, and they just
8
never
hour
run out of gas.
5-player Simic will come out one day.
Yeah, I'll cry.
8-hour 5-player Simic. I might quit the channel if you guys try to get me to do that.
No.
You guys might have to find somebody else. Oh man, Simic is probably no, not probably. Simic is the strongest color combination for sure.
And both of you guys had a number 2 on your list, right?
I don't ever think Simic is boring to play against. I think Simic is annoying. And I think Simic is like bothersome, and I think it gets under people's skin. But I don't think that when people see stuff,
yeah, it's not boring because they're doing crazy things. So it's not boring, exactly. But it is annoying. Yeah,
that's fair.
But that's why Simic gets a pass, and that's why Simic gets then Simic is number 2 for me for my Tatiova deck. I love Tatiova. That was like the second commander deck I ever built, and it's really, really good, and I just love playing it so much. But every time I see somebody play a Simic deck, they always just do crazy things. And I like playing Solitaire as much as anybody else, but I also do enjoy watching other people play Solitaire on their boards and just doing all these fun, big, huge, splashy, crazy stuff because they can. And I think that's why Simic gets a pass.
Yeah. Well, I believe that's going to wrap it up for our not tier list, our ranking system for the 2-color guild color combinations. I don't know if you guys would ever care to do a 3-color combination. That's like the only other one we could do though, right? Like we could probably talk about like the monocolor decks or something. We could, but like 3 is probably the only other one we could do because 4 kind of just feels like 5, and 5 is there's no identity. There's no reason to talk about it. But yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We do try to do Q&A. We haven't really had any questions recently However, there is one that I wanted to do last episode that we didn't get to do. So this is from Thomas. Sent this question to us in regarding last episode where we were talking about our favorite cards of the year. He said that his favorite, he said, Bernard is my favorite commander of 2023, but I think my favorite card of the year is Breach the Multiverse. And then his question is, how did you guys feel about the releases in 2023 as a whole for the game, outside of the fact that we can all agree on the fact that Wizards is releasing too much product?
I think Wizards has done a lot better job of listening to its players. Now, as far as oversaturating the market with content and product, that's neither here nor there. We all know that that's something that needs to slow down. But this year, I can't think of a set that I thought to myself, that was a bad set. And maybe I just am being too nice and I just like all the stuff all the time. But, there's not really, maybe March of the Machines was a little bit underwhelming, but even then that still had some really fun, good cards in it. So I don't know. I think that they kind of knocked it out of the park this year as far as the quality, but way too much quantity.
It is way too much. I feel like the quality is for the most part keeping up with the quantity, but it is too much stuff. Like we're neck deep in spoilers for the next set before we even get to open product for the current set. Like it's just insane, and I would appreciate a slowdown, but they're not going to slow down because this is the new normal, Jason. But I actually
gotta keep.
I would say that the one set that I was like, okay, Doctor Who. I didn't care about Doctor Who. We talked about that on a recent episode of the podcast. None of us cared about Doctor Who, really. The only other set in 2023 that I didn't really care about was Phyrexia All Will Be One. I felt like that set just as a whole just didn't really do much for me. But all the standard sets, I thought March of the Machine was gas. It has a lot of really cool commanders, a lot of good staple-ish cards. I think it's a slept-on set. I think March of the Machine was good. Lord of the Rings was like the best-selling Magic set of all time. We brought a lot of new people into the game. So I think overall the releases for 2023 were pretty good. What do you think, Preston?
Sorry, I have to make one point based on something you just said. Phyrexia all will be one. There's an argument that it has the strongest or the best card of the year in the new Elish Norn that got printed. There's an argument for that.
Yeah, but no one plays it because everyone hates it. Yes, sure, debatably, if we're just basing it off a power level, yes, that's very good. And then the namesake card, All Will Be One, is a very powerful combo piece. But no one's playing those cards for the most part because everyone hates them.
Yeah, but
yes, they're strong.
That was the only point I was trying to make. It was a strong set.
Yeah. For me, at least, the All Will Be One March of the Machine sets were kind of disappointing, but that was more sort of lore, in my opinion, at least. The sets themselves, in regards to cards, didn't really bother me. I don't like how they handled the story with those sets, really, but yeah, as for the actual cards themselves, I think they really did knock it out of the park this year for the most part.
All right. Well, if you guys have any other questions, you can leave a comment in the video, reach out to us on any of our social medias, links to all of those in the description of the video, or I'm sure there's other ways as well. Tune in next episode. We're still trying to figure out if we're going weekly or keeping it bi-weekly for the podcast, but we'll let you guys know and you'll be able to keep up with that. And check out any of our other recent videos you may not have seen, and we'll see you guys next time.